The new Brawler Belle. You've probably already seen videos about her stats, but I'm going to talk about some more specific stats you probably haven't heard already. I'm also going to talk about a bunch of important interactions that all of her different mechanics have with other brawlers and in different modes. And if you stay tuned until the end, you're going to know a lot more tips about Belle than other people when she comes out, so you're going to have a big advantage over your opponents. So the best thing about Belle's attack is the massive range. She effectively has the longest range in the game at 10 2/3 tiles. You technically have brawlers who can have a longer range, but none who can actually deal a significant amount of consistent damage like she can. Every single shot she has is going to go 10 2/3 tiles. So with this range, Belle is just going to be very good on open maps where you can capitalize on this range, and you're not going to be just attacking directly into walls. So open maps like Backyard Bowl and Brawl Ball, those are going to be very good for Belle, because you can just stay 10 2/3 tiles away from your opponent and they won't be able to hit you, but you're going to be able to hit them since you outrange every single brawler in the game. Now, you are very close to the range of Piper, who's at 10 tiles, and the range of Brock at 10 1/3 tiles, so for those matchups, they will probably still be able to hit you, since it's difficult to keep people at the very end of your range. For most brawlers, you will be able to just completely outrange them if you're playing Belle. And one of the special mechanics of her attack is that the Shock Blast jumps between enemies. So this mechanic starts 1 second after you hit your first target, and it's going to jump to the closest enemy as long as they're within 3 tiles of the first person that you hit. And then once it travels to the next target, it'll wait another 1 second and then jump to a new target, and it'll do that over and over again until there's no more targets to go to or one of the targets dies. So since it takes 1 second between the time that it jumps to a new target and takes about 0.2 seconds to travel between targets, that means you can expect that this attack is going to deal damage every 1.2 seconds so long as your opponents are next to each other. And it deals 770 damage every time this happens, so that can stack up pretty quickly, especially if they're near like a high safe or something where you know they're pretty much always going to be within range of it. Then you can really rack up the damage with this. And now you might think that this is very good against opposing support brawlers who generally like to stay close to their teammates to help them out. For example, Gene with his Magic Puff's star power, you want to stay close to your teammates so that way you can heal them. And even just with your super when you're playing Gene, you want to pull brawlers to you who can be cleaned up by your teammates dealing more damage than you. The thing is, the Magic Puff star power actually has a radius of 4 tiles, which is 1 tile more than the distance that Belle's attack will jump to. So you can actually heal your opponents with Magic Puffs while still avoiding Belle's attack. But this is pretty hard to do. And another example of this is Ruff's Field Promotion star power, where you also just want to have your teammates stand within range of you. That actually has a 3.33 tile radius, so it's very slightly larger than the radius of where this attack is going to jump to from Belle. So if you're running Field Promotion, it's going to be extremely difficult to actually buff your teammates while still avoiding the attack, and since everyone's moving around, you're probably going to run within 3 tiles of each other multiple times. So for those star powers, this attack actually does pretty well at countering them, because it's just going to be very difficult to get any value out of them. They would have to be the perfect distance apart in order to not take any damage from the jump shots of your attack, and so most of the time you're just going to get a lot of value out of them if they are to stay close to their teammates. Now, Belle's super is a very interesting mechanic. On impact, it does 700 damage to your opponent, which really isn't that much, but of course, the best thing is that it increases the damage they take by 35% permanently until they die. And 35% is a pretty big number, and it's going to change a lot of the interactions. So what you can sort of tell how much damage or how many attacks you need to output is that a 35% damage buff against them is exactly the same situation as if their maximum health was reduced by 26%. So that means they're at 74% of their original health. So if you just take your opponent's health and multiply that by 0.74, which is almost exactly 3/4, then that's going to be the equivalent health you need to take out if there was no damage buff. So for example, if you see an El Primo with 8,400 health at max level, you hit him with your super, he's essentially going to be reduced to 3/4 of that, which is just about 6,300 health. So that's a 2,100 health chunk that you take off him just like that with your super shot, and you get the 700 damage on top of that. But the thing is, there are a lot of supers in this game that can deal thousands of damage to your opponents, so really just chopping their effective health by 2,000 in the best case scenarios when you're against really high health brawlers honestly doesn't seem all that broken. But the thing is, this health reduction is permanent, so as opposed to some other brawler like Piper where you can smack someone for almost 3,000 damage if they get hit by a max range ambush charged attack, they can always just heal that off. But with Belle, once they get hit by the super, they're never healing that attack off, and so that makes that damage even more valuable against them. Another drawback to this super is that it does take 5 shots to charge up, and for a long range sniper type brawler, that could take a while, and you have to hit your super shot on top of that. It's like Gene's super. If you miss miss it, it's completely worthless, and you just got to go and charge up your super again. So you're not going to be able to get these supers over and over again, and so you really got to make sure that you use it when it counts. And so typically I think you're going to want to auto aim this super like you do with Jean, just so that way you can guarantee your shots if you're close enough to some of your opponents, because when you do hit this super, it gets a lot of value, just permanently essentially reducing your opponent's maximum health by that 26%. That's going to be very, very good. And I think this super is going to let Belle see a lot of play in Siege, because it does work on Siege bots and all movable targets. And since the Siege bot has 45,000 health, that's essentially an 11,700 health reduction that you're putting on that bot when you hit it with your super. And of course, you're going to hit the bot with your super since it's predictable where it's going to move, so it's hard to miss that shot. But you're going to have to deal 11,700 less damage in order to take that robot out, which is a really, really big advantage when it comes to Siege. Now, Belle's gadget is pretty interesting. It's similar to Beau's Mines, where you can spawn a trap on the ground, and then after a second or so, it becomes hidden from your opponents, and they sort of have to memorize its location if they don't want to trigger it. But when they do trigger it, which is when they come within one tile of it, it will explode and deal 500 damage, as well as slow them for 3 seconds. Now, those stats don't sound like they're going to do too much, but I think there are a lot of situations in which this gadget's going to be useful. First of all, it's great for protection against just melee assassin brawlers like Mortis and Edgar. You don't have much health when you're playing as Belle, so it's very important that you have some sort of answer. If your opponents run a Mortis and Edgar and just sort of try to aggro you the whole game, you do have these 3 gadgets so that when they do jump on top of you, you can slow them down, and they still might be able to take you out even if they are slowed, but it's going to be very difficult for them to retreat and get out of it alive, so your teammates can hopefully come up and clean up the kills in those situations. I also think this gadget's going to be great in Brawl Ball when there are very narrow choke points near your goal, because you can just put a trap in there and basically your opponents are guaranteed to run into it if they ever want to score the ball. And you can even stall for time towards the end of the game. If you somehow have a lot of gadgets left, you can just place all of your traps right in the choke points near the goal, and they're just going to be slowed down constantly and take a lot of damage while they're at it. So it's likely going to be a lot of free kills with this gadget, because once they're slowed down, you can basically just auto aim your attacks and get a lot of damage off on them. So I think this is a pretty solid gadget, not too broken, but certainly not weak either. Now, Belle's first star power, which is probably what we're going to have for the first couple days that she's out, is positive feedback when you get a 25% damage reducing shield for every shot that you hit on your opponents. And the shield lasts for about 1.5 seconds before it fades away. So since it reacts to when you hit your shots, it's actually going to be up a good chunk of the time, because when you're healing, you're not taking damage anyway. So it doesn't really matter that you're not going to have your shield at that point in time. But when you come out and start using your attacks on your opponents, that's when you're going to be in their line of fire, and that's when you're going to need the shield the most. And luckily enough for you, that's when you're attacking them. So that's when you're going to get the shield with this star power. So I think a good chunk of the time when you are in combat, you're going to have the shield up. And so you're really just going to have a 25% shield for a large portion of the match. And I think that's a very, very good thing to have. If we compare it to a similar star power like photosynthesis for Sprout, it gives you 5% less shield, because photosynthesis was originally 30%. It's actually 5% more than the photosynthesis shield following the upcoming balance changes where they reduce it to 20%, but each shield only lasts 1.5 seconds instead of 3 seconds that it would be for Sprout, and shots are definitely going to be harder to hit with Belle than for Sprout, so I don't think it's quite as good as photosynthesis would be in its peak, but I can definitely see it being played a lot because Belle is such a squishy brawler, so that shield could definitely save her in a lot of situations. Now, the other star power, Grounded, is a really interesting mechanic. So whenever you hit someone with your super, it's going to freeze their ammo for 3 seconds when you hit them. This has some really high potential. If you manage to catch your opponent when they don't have any ammo left, they'll be stuck without ammo, unable to attack you for a solid 3 seconds, and that is a massive window of opportunity. You can sort of attack them or jump in on them, do whatever you want to do, because they won't be able to attack you back and provide any sort of pressure to keep you away from them. So it pairs really well with brawlers like Stu or Mortis or Edgar, who can just dash in on your opponents and deal a lot of damage really quickly. If you can communicate with your team and coordinate that sort of stuff, let your teammates know when you're about to hit someone with your super when you're playing Belle, and then if they're like a Stu or something, they can just dash in real quick and start pelting that opponent, and they won't be able to answer back because they'll be pretty much out of ammo, or they'll only be stuck with the 1 or 2 ammo they do have left, and so it's going to lead into a lot of free kills that way. That being said, it's probably not going to be as good if you're just going in alone with randoms, because you're not really going to be able to coordinate too much, and you can't capitalize off this effect too much if you're playing Belle, because it is still going to be pretty hard to hit your shots. Just because they don't have ammo doesn't mean they can't juke your shots, and so you're not going to be able to get close enough to them in time so that way you can auto aim your shots and guarantee damage, damage on them, and so you're not going to be able to get too much value out of this star power. So I do think the other star power is probably going to be better if you're playing alone, but I can definitely see this grounded star power getting a lot of value in teams. We'll just have to see how good people are able to capitalize off of this effect. And those are the last of the tips and stats I have for Belle, and that is all for today, guys, so see you later.